Most people don't fail at financial goals because they're careless. They fail because the goals were never designed for their reality. Today on the Do Different Better show, I'm going to be talking about why financial goals don't stick and how to set ones that actually move you forward based on where you're starting from, not where someone else tells you you should be. Stay with me. This one's going to be different. And if you want to crack the goal setting and goal reaching code, stay right here. Welcome back, my asset builders in training. Welcome back to another episode of the Do Different Better show. I'm your host, Elaine Rasmussen, CEO of Social Impact Now and Connective Institute, and the founder of the Integrated Capital Fund. I am so happy for you to be with us today. I know the world is feeling especially heavy right now, but we're going to get you back into shape. But before we get started, I want to give a huge shout out to all the folks who came to my in person Do Different Better live event last week. I love how inspired you all were, and I'm excited to hear how successfully you complete your 90-day plans that you created at the workshop. Don't forget to DM me or tag me on IG on your achievements and your mindset shifts. But let's get back to the show. Today, I'm unpacking a question that almost everyone asks every January, but very few people actually answer honestly. Why do financial goals get stuck? I started the show talking about why most goal setting advice fails, but not because people lack discipline, but because the advice ignores real life, real context, and real actual starting points. But today, you know me, we're going to go deeper. Because before you can set meaningful financial goals, you have to understand something very fundamental. Not everyone is playing the same financial game. But let's take a step back. Let me just take a guess on what's happened for you in the past, or maybe what's happening even this year. You've set financial goals before. January comes around, you feel motivated, maybe even righteous, and you say things like, "This year, I'm going to get serious. This is the year I finally get ahead. This year, I'm going to stop playing around with my money." You open a spreadsheet, you download an app, you name your goals, and then life shows up. The goal quietly fades into the background. The spreadsheet becomes some aspirational fiction that sits in a on a in a database somewhere that you never look at. And by March, and maybe even February, you're pretending the whole thing never happened. Does any of this sound familiar? I want to be very clear about something right up front. You're not bad at setting goals, and you're possibly not undisciplined, and you're not failing at money. What's failing is the way we've been taught to think about financial goals in the first place. Most financial goal setting advice assumes something that is generous at best. It assumes that everyone starts at the same place, has stable income, has predictable expenses, has emotional bandwidth, and has time to optimize, which is so adorable, so cutesy, so very demure, and wildly inaccurate. Financial goals are often treated like moral tests. If you hit them, you're good with your money. And if you don't, you suck. You must lack discipline, you must lack focus, and you must lack willpower. And sometimes that may be the case, but oftentimes it's not, or it's not the only thing. But let me say this quite plainly. Most financial goals don't fail because people aren't trying hard enough. They fail because they're a disconnect from reality. So, we need to talk about the goal setting industrial complex. It is a multi billion-dollar industry, right? I'm going to help you with your goals, right? And I'm going to be one of them, but I'm hoping we're going to get another layer deeper that's actually meaningful and help drives you to success. You know the one, it tells you make your goals smart, SMART. Automate everything, track every dollar, wake up earlier, hustle harder, and visualize success. Somewhere along the way, goal setting stopped being a tool and became about performance and being compared to everybody else. People started setting goals they thought they should have instead of the goals that actually fit their lives, their dreams, and where they actually want to go. And then they internalize the shame when those goals actually don't stick. So here's the uncomfortable truth: a goal that ignores your context isn't ambitious, it's actually quite delusional. So let's talk about why smart goals aren't always smart. If you're not familiar with SMART goals, it's an acronym that stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. If you take the first letter of each of those words, you get SMART. And on paper, that sounds reasonable. But in real life, you can have the most beautifully crafted AI driven SMART goal and still feel stressed, frozen, or resentful while you're chasing it. Why? Because SMART goals don't ask how volatile your income is, how much decision fatigue you're already carrying, whether you're supporting other people or might have an anticipation of supporting other people by surprise, the season of life that you're actually in this moment. Are you a new parent? Are you retiring? Where are you in your actual life cycle? They don't ask whether your nervous system is already overloaded. And I know I've talked about this particularly in episode 1 in just talking about my own money journey. These goals just assume that you're a robot and with a checking account. And just spoiler alert, you're not a robot, right? So you might be thinking, well, Elaine, why do SMART goals work so well in my company or in my organization where I work? Well, that's because your organization has a lot more predictability, right? You go in, you're doing relatively the same thing every day, whether you're at a nonprofit and you're delivering programs or services, whether you're a company that manufactures widgets, or whether you're a service provider, consultant. A lot of the work has a level of predictability that we don't necessarily see in our life. Life is not as predictable as a company that you work for where the structure is and you actually manufactured to breed as much predictability as possible. Life is more of a wild west, right? So that's why SMART goals show up differently in your personal life than they do necessarily in your work life. And here's where things usually go sideways. People confuse aspiration with strategy. Aspiration sounds like, I want to be debt free. I want to invest more. I want financial freedom. Strategy sounds like, given my current income volatility, obligations, here's what actually will move me forward. Aspiration is important, but aspiration without a strategy really turns into pressure. And pressure is not a great motivator over the long term, and it's not sustainable, especially for high earners. So now let's talk about you for a second, particularly if you're a high earner or even a solid, stable earner. You're often expected to have it all together financially. People assume you don't struggle, you don't worry, you don't get stuck. So when your goals don't stick, the shame is quieter and deeper. You begin to think, I should know better, or I make too much money to feel this uncertain or be this poor, right? Why does this feel so hard? And here's the truth about most financial advice that it won't tell you. Particularly high earners are often over goaled and under supported. They're managing super complex decisions that they don't necessarily have the expertise or knowledge to actually navigate because they are an expert in their thing. But the natural assumption is because you're an expert in this other thing, you should be an expert in this thing, right? Perhaps they're managing multiple responsibilities. Well, that's all of us, right? As you move up the socioeconomic ladder, those things can get more complex, right? Maybe you have competing priorities, right? And that's also all of us. But then you're wondering why, because you're sitting at this particular level, why a generic goal template isn't magically fixing everything and giving you a clear path to where you want to go and where you need to go. So, how do we bring this all together? You want to start to really think about, why haven't my goals been sticking up until now? And this requires you to really have a very honest conversation with yourself, right? And why haven't my goals stuck? Because some of it might be you, right? You're just not caring about it enough, or you're setting goals that you don't really care about. Again, have you set goals in the past? And if you have them written down, I encourage you to go back to them and look through that journal or look through that app and be like, was that a goal that I wanted, or is that a goal because that's where somebody told me I was supposed to be? Maybe my parents, maybe my spouse, maybe my colleagues, or I picked it off of TikTok, or I picked it up off of Instagram. Was it a goal that actually meant something to you? I'm going to guess oftentimes, if you are really honest with yourself, it wasn't a goal that you had any sort of connection to. It was a goal that was driven from outside of you as opposed to inside of you. So, of course, if it doesn't have any meaning for you, you're going to be far less successful in achieving it, right? We achieve those things that we actually have connected to, that are driving us in some kind of emotional, spiritual, physical capacity, right? And I want you to think about, financial goals don't stick because they're often borrowed instead of chosen. They're premature instead of sequence. It's not that it's a bad goal, it's just not the right goal at this moment in time. Where you are, do you have the resources? Do you have the support? Are you in the position to be able to actually execute on those goals, whether that be time, talent, or treasure, right? Or resources, right? They're sometimes optimized instead of contextualized. They're set from a place of comparison, guilt, or I should, and not necessarily from a place of clarity. And let me be clear, clarity is not motivation. Clarity is what actually moves people forward, and not only move people forward, but have you stand 10 toes down on what that thing is and be unequivocal, immovable about that thing. So let's say, I think I shared with you all in a number of episodes of my money journey. When I first started, I was a single mom. I was making $12 an hour. I was working at a university. And the reason why I was having such crappy pay is because I was getting a free master's degree and I was working on my doctorate and I didn't have to pay tuition. So think about that. Somebody making $12 an hour as a single parent, right? And I started my money journey literally because I had been through that experience of like creating these financial goals and being woefully unsuccessful with achieving even a monicum of success in those goals. But they weren't tethered to the reality that I was making $12 an hour. So, what could I do as a single parent making $12 an hour? And I started with just, I'm going to save $5 a week. I didn't even put a number on like what I wanted at the end of the year. My goal was really short term. Every week, I was going to save $5. Weekly was something I could wrap my head around. Because I was still in this survival mode, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that in the next segment. Because I was in survival mode as a single parent at the bottom of the financial food chain, it was so hard for me to even be able to see a year in advance. All I could see was 1 week into the future. All like that was meaningful for me was 1 week in the future. So for me, my financial goal, one of my first successful financial goals was saving $5 a week consistently. That was the goal. because that goal actually fit the context that I was in. And it felt powerful, powerful after several months of consistently doing that, that when I actually needed, I had an emergency come up and I actually had the money that I needed for the emergency and I didn't have to stress or wonder about how was I going to take care of that emergency, because that little bit of $5 that I was saving every single week was actually now had accumulated to a place where now I could take care of an emergency. And then I moved to a place of like, okay, now I'm going to save $10 a month. I mean, $10 a week. Now I'm going to save $15 a week. So as you can see, that quickly began to compound. And so having that success then moved me into a different mindset to even go to the next stage of my goal setting. So again, so if the problem isn't discipline and it's not intelligence and it's not effort, then what does work? In the next segment, I'm going to be talking about financial mobility, why the starting point actually matters. And I've given you a little bit of taste of that just right now. Why economic class changes how goals function, and why not everyone should be setting the same kinds of financial goals at the same time. So stay with me. This is the Do Different Better show. Welcome back to the Do Different Better show. I'm your host, Elaine Rasmussen. Let's start with something that might feel uncomfortable, but necessary. Not everyone has the same relationship with money, right? I think we know that on an intuitive level, but it's another thing to say it out loud. Not everyone has the same relationship to money goals. And we know that because of conversations, or conversations we do have, or conversations we don't have with our partner, with our parents. It becomes really apparent how different people are think about or what their relationship to money and money goals are. And pretending otherwise doesn't make the system fair. It actually makes people feel highly inadequate. We talk about money like it's neutral, like goals exist in some sort of crazy vacuum. Like everyone starts on the same page, on the same square on the chessboard. And we know in our hearts, and way back in the back of our big brains, we know that that's actually not true. But we move about the world and we look at these things on Instagram and Facebook, and we forget. We push that all the way to the back, and we're like, why am I not doing this, or why can't I do that, or why am I not at the same place this person is? We're the same age. We have the same job. You start doing all these comparisons. And it's important that if we don't name that, we end up giving people advice that sounds inspiring, but doesn't actually help. And that was really why it was important for me that while in the beginning of the year that I do this episode to talk about this and unpack before we start to get into more wealth wisdom that I typically share. Because if we don't deal with this emotional part and we don't really understand and connect with this, particularly in this time, it's winter, it's the time of hibernation, it's the time of reflection. This is a really good time for you to really kind of sit, just sit. And even that means going out for a walk, sitting on a park bench, going to a library. Just take like an hour to just sit with some of what I'm sharing with you. So let's now define a term you don't hear enough in personal finance conversations. I know I certainly don't. And that's financial mobility. And I have the same issue as it relates to entrepreneurship, right? And I have the same conversation. I often talk to foundations or investors that want to invest in different kinds of financial mobility vehicles, like down payment assistance programs for people or other kinds of support for communities, rural communities, urban communities. And I often talk about giving somebody an individual grant like a down payment assistance program is great. However, one, it's a taxable event. So let's just say you're getting $20,000 of down payment assistance. You're not actually getting the full value of that $20,000 because by law, you are going to be taxed on that $20,000. So that's the first part. The second part is if you're allowing them to buy a home, but they are in a job that has no financial economic mobility, they have no opportunity to get raises, they have little opportunity to get advancement and pay increases. Well, yes, you may have gotten them a house, but what does that do for them long term? Right? Have you actually saddled them with a lack of success for them only to eventually lose that home because they have not been able to economically move up with the pace and scale of the growth of that asset? As we all know, if you've ever bought a home continues to draw on your resources. The roof needs to be done. You have a leak in the basement. And so while you may, while the down payment assessment, it's great for you to get into the home, are you on a financial mobility ladder that allows you to be able to keep that home? Or are you eventually going to end up losing that home because you can't maintain it? You can't pay the taxes as that asset begins to appreciate. The taxes are going to go up. And if your pay is not keeping pace with the taxes, that could be a problem. I know here where I live, and where my son lives, the tax the taxes, property taxes went up by 16%. That's a lot. And if your pay hasn't gone up by 16%, I hope you can start to see there begins to be a real gap. And if that happens exponentially over time, well, you're looking for disaster, and that's where we start to see communities fail. But let's get back to what we're talking about today. Financial mobility is not just about earning more money, it's about your ability to absorb shocks, recover from setbacks, move forward without everything falling apart. In plain language, it's the difference between running on a treadmill and actually changing elevation. And here's the key part: financial mobility is sequential. You don't skip steps just because your income actually begins to grow up or glow up, as you might say. Most financial advice assumes everyone is in the same place, and they're not. Broadly speaking, people tend to live in one of four financial realities, not permanently, but at any given moment in time. Number one is survival mode. Your goal isn't necessarily wealth, right? And I demonstrated that in my own story. It's about staying afloat and about you're managing volatility, you're managing emergencies, and you're managing unpredictability. Telling someone in survival mode to invest more is like telling someone in a storm to think about interior decorating, right? Wrong priority, wrong time, right? Number two, stability mode. This is where most people first begin to breathe. And I shared that in my own story, right? Bills are paid, emergencies are manageable, the chaos quiets down. Goals here are about reducing stress. You might even see a little bit more predictability in your life and less volatility. You're smoothing cash flow. It becomes a little bit more regular, right? A lot more regular, as a matter of fact. And you start to build buffers, right? You're building a savings plan. Maybe you've got a CD. Maybe you've got a 401k. This stage is highly underrated and often rushed past, right? People might get a 30% jump in salary and now they're doing things, but they haven't really gone through of like, is everything actually stable? And let me make sure that I live in this space for a while so I can actually have space to think and imagineer, right? Number three, growth mode. Now we're talking about expansion. This is where investing actually makes sense. Assets start to matter. Leverage enters the conversation, right? But here's the trap: people often jump here way too early. And segment number four, optimization mode. This is where most financial content actually lives. It's very aspirational. It's very like sometimes unattainable for 90% of the population. This is where folks are talking about tax efficiency, tax strategies, um, really advanced, complicated financial instruments, structuring wealth, right? But optimization assumes the other stages are actually solid. And that assumption is where a lot of frustration comes from because you may not know that. You just know that you're feeling on the struggle bus in some kind of way, shape, form, or fashion, right? So here's the part that we don't say enough. And I want to change that, especially in polite company. Economic class shapes how financial goals function. And if you grew up without safety nets, your goals will naturally prioritize security, predictability, protection. And if you grew up with a lot of access and fallback options, right, your goals can afford to emphasize growth and risk and long term optimization. Neither one of these is wrong, but they are different. And pretending they're the same leads people to chase goals that don't match their nervous system or, quite frankly, their reality. So now let's quickly talk about high earners for just a second. So you may see this term kicking around on Instagram or social media, and they're called Henrys. Henrys stands for high earners, not rich yet. They often skip stability emotionally, even if they achieve it financially. They often dive right into optimization, comparisons, what's next thinking, and then they wonder why money still feels so stressful, why financial decisions feel heavy, why goals don't actually bring any kind of relief. You can be earning well and still lack felt stability. And if stability isn't felt, growth goals will not stick. So here's the reframe. Instead of asking, what financial goal should I set? I'm going to encourage you to ask yourself, what kind of financial mobility am I building right now? That question changes everything. It shifts you from comparison to sequencing, from pressure to clarity, from should to strategy. So now that we've named the real issue, goals don't stick when they're set without regard for your starting point, your capacity, your class context, and your season of life. In the last segment, I'm going to talk about how to set financial goals that actually work, not by doing more, but by choosing better, sequencing smarter, and aligning goals with real life. So stay with me. You're listening to the Do Different Better show. You can listen to us on AM 950, but if you want to check me out and see the episodes, maybe you're a visual learner, you can check me out on YouTube at Do Different Better. Welcome back to the Do Different Better show. I'm your host, Elaine Rasmussen. All right, let's take a deep cleansing breath. That was a lot. I've talked about why your goals don't stick. I've talked about I've talked about your starting point, your financial mobility, and your economic reality. Now let's come to the part people usually rush through. How do you actually set financial goals that work without turning your life into a spreadsheet, especially if spreadsheets aren't your thing? I love me a spreadsheet. That's my love language. But we also don't want to impact your self-worth and reduce it to a scorecard. So I've got good news. You don't need better goals. You need better alignment. And guess what? You know that I got you. So let's get into it. Most people think the fix is more goals, tighter timelines, stricter rules. So they add goals like toppings on a pizza, save more, invest more, spend less, optimize taxes, plan for retirement, and somehow also enjoy life. That's not ambition. That is actually cognitive overload. And here's the hard truth: if everything is a goal, then nothing is a priority. And priorities, not goals, are what move people forward. So now you might be asking, or I'm going to ask you, instead of asking what financial goals should I set this year, I want you to ask a different question. I want you to ask, what kind of capacity am I building or needing right now? Capacity is what makes goals achievable without constant self negotiation. It's the difference between pushing yourself uphill and finally finding level ground. So let's talk through this quite simply. At any given moment, most people are primarily building one type of financial capacity, not all four, not forever, just right now. First capacity is stability capacity. This is about reducing stress and volatility. Goals here sound like building an emergency buffer, smoothing out my cash flow, making my income more predictable, whether that means taking on a second job and I'm going to be saving the money from that second job, or going in and asking for a raise, whatever that may be. Paying down high stress debt. These goals don't look sexy on Instagram. They're deeply personal, right? But they can change actually how you sleep at night. I can tell you, I know from firsthand experience. And actually, sleep is a wealth strategy, right? Getting a good night, proper sleep. Now, mind you, I have long since, for a very long time, sleep about 5 hours a night, but it's a solid 5 hours. And if I don't get that solid 5 hours, my brain's mush, which means I can't make good decisions, which means I can't make the decisions I need to meet my financial goals or like execute my financial strategy, right? So sleep is a wealth strategy, just as a side note. The second kind of capacity is optionality capacity. This is about creating a room to choose. Goals here sound like increasing your liquidity, right? And remember, we talked about liquidity is the amount of cash that you have available in a relatively short period of time, usually 30 days, that you can access cash, whether it's cashing out a CD, whether it's selling jewelry, those kinds of things, right? I'm looking to increase my liquidity. I want to be able to have more cash coming in. Maybe you purchase a business, right? That's cash flowing. You are looking for those opportunities where you can generate more cash or more liquid assets that can turn into cash in a relatively short period of time. Maybe you're looking at building flexible savings. Maybe you're looking at creating a margin in your budget. Maybe your margin right now is 0 or 5%, and you want to move that margin to 10, 15%, meaning the difference between what you're making and what you actually expend has more wiggle room. Optionality is where what allows you to say, I don't have to take this deal. I don't have to take this job. I can wait on making a decision on that particular investment opportunity. More powerfully, I can walk away, right? I can walk away from this deal. I can walk away from this job. I can walk away from this relationship. Maybe you're in an unhappy relationship, and it's time for you to leave, right? By having this liquidity or having this mindset, you're like, I know that I can walk away and I know that I'm going to be okay when I walk away, right? Maybe it's walking away from your living situation. Maybe it's walking away from a job. And that is the true power and agency that you have over your life. That is the greatest feeling in the world, to be able to be like, I don't have to be here. I don't have to stay here. I can leave this job and I'm going to be okay, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that everything's roses, but you're like, I know that I'm going to be able to pay my bills for the next 6 months, or I know that I'm highly marketable and I'm in a relationship, or I'm in a job that doesn't appreciate me. And that is actually where we start to see where growth actually lives. Goals here sound like I'm making investments. I'm acquiring assets, whatever those assets may be. Ideally, assets that are going to appreciate or grow in value over time, right? Using money to influence outcomes, right? If I put my money here, it's going to provide an opportunity that's going to show up over here, right? And that has lots of different ways that that can look. So, but leverage only works if earlier capacities are actually solid, right? Otherwise, if they're not, it's going to show up very glaringly clearly. It actually just magnifies your stress. You may not know what the tension is, but it's what's happening, right? Whether you know it consciously or not, what's happening is there's misalignment, and your body is feeling it, your mind is feeling it, and that's what you're feeling that comes out in what we call stress. Number 4 is alignment capacity. This is a quiet one. It's about making sure your money supports your actual life. Goals here sound like reducing mental load, simplifying your account, aligning spending aligning your spending with your values. Alignment doesn't always increase net worth, but it actually increases clarity, right? And clarity improves every financial decision downstream. When you are clear about what you do want, what you don't want, what you're willing to put up with, what you're not willing to put up with, where you are movable and where you are not movable, it is a powerful place to sit in. And I can tell you again from firsthand experience. This framework works because it does 3 things traditional goal setting doesn't. First, it respects reality. Second, it reduces comparison. And third, it limits overwhelm. So you're not asking, what should someone like me be doing? You're flipping the script and you're asking, what would meaningfully improve my financial life right now? That is a powerful shift and a deep and meaningful one. It is highly internal, it is highly personalized for where you are sitting in your life. And here's what I want you to notice. You don't need 10 financial goals. You might need 1 primary goal, 1 supporting goal, and permission to ignore the rest. Progress comes from sequencing, not stacking. And I would even say 1 step further, it's about the system that you create that allows you to actually create the environment for not only sequencing, but also success, right? And sequencing is a form of self-trust. So if you know that trusting yourself is really the deep-seated part, either 1, you really need to start to think about what do you need to do to gain some more self-trust, or I'm the kind of person is I'm going to fake it till I make it. I'm going to act like I have self-trust with the goal of that if I do that enough, that becomes my new muscle memory. And now I have the self-trust that I've been pretending, right? It's a weird thing that happens, but one of those 2 strategies, depending on who you are, but you need to know yourself well to know which one of those is going to work. Either 1, start working on the things that will provide you with self-trust, or start just pretending that you trust yourself. And there are things that you can do. And if you DM me, I'm happy to share some of the things that I have done to be able to do that. So I want to begin to leave you with some things to think about. Financial goals aren't promises to be perfect. It's actually a tool to reduce friction. And when you have a reduction in friction, it actually is also freeing because it's 1 less thing your brain has to worry about, right? You may have heard the term decision fatigue. Well, again, if you start to put in a system, right? Look, going back to my example of saving $5 a week, I had that $5 automatically set up to go into a different bank account that I did not have an ATM card for, right? At a different bank. That made it a lot more difficult, one, for me to access that money and go spending at, whether online shopping or, one of, if I see something in the store, I'm like, oh, I've got it. So let me spend it, right? I created a system that made it difficult to access that money, right? But I also created a system of automating that $5 to leave my account. And I actually selected a bank that allowed me to online increase that amount so that once again I wouldn't have the friction of going to the bank to make that deposit change, right? As soon as I felt more comfortable with adding more money to that weekly deposit, I could do it automatically from home on my phone, on my laptop, as opposed to if it had been set up where I had to go to the bank and do it, I would never do it. So part of this is really about being super, super honest with yourself about who you are a person. It's about hacking your brain, right? What are your trips? What do you know about yourself? What are your toxic traits that you know about yourself that you are, if you don't put something in place to create less friction, or more friction, right? The opposite might be like, hey, I'm not going to drive this way home every week, because if I drive this way home, I know I'm going to see that one store and I know I'm more likely to pull into that store and I'm going to spend money that I don't have on things that I don't need, right? So sometimes you might need to create more friction of like, I'm going to take the long way home, right? Maybe it's to the gym, right? I need to take a route that's going to take me by the gym because I'm far more likely to go to the gym. But if I take the route to my house that doesn't go by the gym, then no, I'm probably not going to get to the gym and I'm not going to reach that goal that I wanted to lose X amount of weight or whatever the case may be is, right? Once again, financial tools aren't promises to be perfect. They're tools to reduce friction. The best goal is one that lowers stress, not increases your stress, clarifies decisions, and makes your next move obvious, crystal clear. It's also not impressive. It's not optimized. It's just effective. If this episode helped you rethink how you approach money, come and find me. You can catch the full episodes of the Do Different Better show, not only this episode, but all of our episodes in the past. We are coming up on our 100th episode, so I'm really excited. We're going to be doing some really fun things related to our 100th episode. But you can catch me on YouTube. And you can also find me on Instagram, where I'm sharing Chronicles of a Neurodivergent Black Woman in Finance. So you can see many episodes of that on Instagram at Do Better with Elaine. That's my Instagram handle. And you can always come to my website, which is www.dodifferentbetter.com, and there you're going to find events, resources, and what's next. And we have some really exciting things that we have coming up, some online digital content and some worksheets and tools that you can start to use and optimize for yourself that you can also share with people that you love. I think we're also going to be having things where you can start to conversation starters with your partner, with your children, with your parents, that are going to be super, super helpful. So definitely you're going to want to check that out over the coming months. We're also going to be building an online community. So we encourage you to join that online community where you can find wealth peers and wealth circles that you can start to have these conversations with other like-minded folks. But I hope that this episode has helped you. I hope that you are getting some new insight into how you can really start to identify and craft some meaningful financial goals that feel achievable, that actually improve your clarity, reduce your stress, and just gives you some breathing room, because that is the goal. Literally, it should not be this thing where you are waking up stressed at every Monday morning because you're going to your job, or every Sunday night you're dreading thinking about, I got to go back to that place that I don't really want to go to, but I have to go to because I don't have my financial life set up in order, or I'm going through a divorce and I don't even know what's going on in my financial life. Whatever the situation is, I hope that you've been able to get some clarity, some direction, and I can't wait to see you and hear from you to tell me what's working for you, what's not working for you. Let me know what aha moments are you having. I love to hear it. We are going to be starting some Finance Friday lives on Instagram, so I'll let you know about those. But I really want to hear from you. I really want to hear how you're doing, and what could I be sharing with you that will be super, super helpful. So once again, to close out this episode, thank you for hanging out with me, spending time with me. You're listening to the Do Different Better show. Make sure you like, make sure you're subscribed. We want to get to 1,000 subscribers by my birthday in March. So, are you going to help me get my birthday present? But don't forget to listen to the show on AM 950, and I'll see you next time where you begin to do different better.